So I'm here with Hugh, and I wanted to pick up on a very interesting comment that or concept really, that he introduced in a class the other day that I thought would be interesting to explore what's behind it. And the comment that he made was a very simple one around the physiology of success. And so my question is, can you explore a little bit what you feel is behind the physiology of success, and why that's so relevant and actually important an important thing that we can explore through movement, through the body, and specifically in our practice through Sukhita yoga?
I think it came through just as kind of a remark in my mind as we were teaching about how we get confused around what we would describe as success. And in the yoga, the temptation is to have an idea of success as being a relationship to perhaps the shape you're making, or the amount of effort you're making, or the sort of physical response you're getting out of your body. So whether you feel you're getting a good stretch, or that the body feels responsive. And these are very tangible descriptions of success. But I think in that tangibility, we lose sight of something which is really quite different to that, which I came up with this idea of the physiology of success, because the success in the yoga is not about the amount of striving that you put in, or the degree of stretch or resistance you're pushing through, or the extreme shape that you've been able to make, or whether you've been able to go further than you've done before. Success in the yoga comes at a different level, and that level is around the degree of balance that you create, the degree of balance that is present both in the mind and the body.
So can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think a lot of people come to yoga and it's a very tangible practice. And indeed we live in a very tangible world, and all our measures of success that we can tend to have come into contact with in life are very much things that we can feel, or we can mark. There are levels of attainment, and certainly I think it's one of the, it would be helpful to hear from you. How would you move from a very shape orientated practice, and we obviously are overwhelmed with that on social media, so many kind of extreme postures presented, and also how do we move away from this excess of striving that gives us a sense of ownership in the body, gives us a sense of solidity about attainment, and this excess of strength. How do we make that transition from this very tangible practice that we can feel is doing us good, and we can mark our progress, into where you're describing the actual yoga is?
Well, the tangible is the external. And so we tend to judge things by external parameters. And the yoga, for me, is really, the external is the byproduct of the internal. And so the shape that we make is an expression of the release we find. And the release is an internal release. It's working with the mind, it's working with the body, but it's about working to find the freedom in the mind and the freedom in the body for the body to express its maximum capacity without strain.
So what do you feel is the first step around finding that release? You know, so much is now talked about in terms of mindfulness, in whether it's in yoga or anything, and we talk a lot about this, and none of it's really mindfulness at all. It's just a word that's become casually employed to try and suggest that something has more value. What would you describe as the beginning point for a depth of listening in a practice that leads towards this process of release?
Well, an important aspect of mindfulness is if you like, the willingness to see movements of mind, to see the impact that our mental states have, both with the response in the mind, but also with the response in the body.
And how do you feel that's different from when people are saying, but I'm aware of my body, I'm being mindful, I can feel my foot, I can feel this aspect, I have a mindful practice. What's the movement of mind that you're talking about? Because that sounds different, sounds interesting.
Well, directing attention and understanding the experience that when you've directed your attention. So being aware of the orientation of your body, this is awareness. This is, if you like, exteroperception. It's the awareness of the outward shape of your body. But this is not seeing the impact of movements of mind and mental states.
So would you say this is more like a tangible mindfulness? This is like the first, it's the first steps, it's how we can get into the idea of listening. And then we can refine and fine tune that so that we start to listen in perhaps another level.
Well, awareness of the physical body is important in the practice, but if we're aware of our physical shape and in some way that physical shape seems lacking, and then we strain to have an outward appearance of what we perceive to be the correct physical shape, we can do that overriding anything that's actually going on in our mind.
So would you say that's the point where we're actually not mindful anymore at all?
Well, if you like, we've then become attached to the shape, and we're trying to be the shape rather than letting the shape be an expression of how we are.
So does this mean then we've moved more back into the concept and the tangible, and away from the concept that we started this talk around, and you've moved away from the physiology of success?
Yeah, the physiology of success is saying that I need to allow the outward shape of the posture to tell me something. And if I override the outward shape of the posture, trying to achieve some ideal, then I'm not listening to what the body's trying to tell me.
Yeah, okay. So this sounds really fascinating, actually, because it gets us to a real nub of a question. What are we hoping that yoga can reveal to us, and that the body can start to speak to us, that we're missing out on when we simply stay in the tangible concept, outward shape kind of practice?
Well, when we're stuck in the outward shape and the outward concept, we're overriding a recognition that there's a limitation in us which we need to explore. And yoga is all about, if you look at the second verse of the Yoga Sutras, it's Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. It's about understanding the movements of mind and getting to a point where we've released away from these movements of mind. And when we're just being outwardly focused, we're not taking this into account at all. In fact, we're dominating what we're trying to achieve.
And where is it we're going with the release of the movements of mind? What's the, I know it's coming back a little bit to the tangible, what's the goal here? Well, what can we see? What can we hope for?
Well, when we really begin to work with recognizing the impact our mind has, then we begin to see what is obstructing our real practice. And those obstructions are states of mind. And if we begin to then use the states of mind to be part of and instigating our practice, so that our physical shape and our physical movement become a reflection on our relationship to these mental states, then what we find is that as we ease away from these challenging mental states and begin to build a relationship to them, rather than trying to suppress them by dominating through the physical body, then we find that our body begins to release, it begins to become flexible, it becomes light, and those shapes that we originally were so focused on begin to reveal themselves.
So what I'm hearing here is a sense of ease is important, balance, really a kind of freedom, not just a loose and flexible body, but a different quality of freedom that's internally led. You also said something that struck me about it's not to do with dominance. And dominance has that quality of suppression or force. So do you feel that practicing in the way that you're describing gives us a pathway of kindness in the body, so we can really explore how at a very, very subtle level what it really means about taking care, what it really means to have this, to find out how to love ourselves.
This is really at the center of the practice. Until you are prepared to see how your mind moves and then build a relationship to it rather than just react to it. And that relationship has to be based on kindness, it has to be based on self-compassion, because that's the way that we then find that the potency of these different mindsets, are from a very simple basis of desiring to do a particular posture or to be a particular way or to have the body feel a particular way within itself, to long-held patterns of thinking and response and reaction and belief. When we begin to see the impact these things have reflected in our yoga practice, and then we use the outward form of the practice to begin to inform us about when we're becoming more in balance around these things, then what we develop is that, if you like, it's like a virtuous spiral. We begin to develop this relationship with ourselves, which is much kinder, much more compassionate. We begin to see the patterns that are there. They become old friends rather than old enemies. And they're friends because they're teaching us what we need to understand in order to become more in balance. And that's more balanced is then reflected through the postures. It doesn't mean that we end up with a perfect body or that with perfect postures, but we end up with a perfect balance.
So what you're describing here is a completely different motivation. That's what I'm hearing from a pure physical outcome. This physiology of success seems to me that it's much more about a whole embodied transformation, a way to uncover habits, holding patterns, ways in which we're unskillful, the way in which we perhaps have striving tendencies, so that we can start to flip things around and actually have a model in the practice where we're bringing kindness in every movement of mind, so that all our reference points are internal, so that what's outwardly experienced really is, I mean, it's what you see, but it's only the beginning of what's going on. The dialogue is internal and can be really feels to me like it can be really transformatory. It's a very big rewrite of the way we are, the way we move.
The internal transformation then just gets reflected through into the external transformation. So the practice then becomes very light, it becomes very soft, but that doesn't mean weak. There's a soft strength here, because when we begin to take the striving, tension out of the body and out of the mind, then what gets replaced is an energetic support, an energetic balance. And this energetic balance makes us really strong, but not in a way that creates tension. So we don't recognize that strength in our usual frame of reference. But when we experience it, what we notice is that suddenly we can relax our mind and we can relax our body, and the body is supported. And not only is it supported, but because the body's relaxed, it's then able to move into some of the deeper expressions of the postures, which we would have really been pushing and striving to achieve before. And they just ease out into these. And yet we don't create difficulty for ourselves or the body. So there's quite a lot of reporting now through social media and the rest of it about injuries for participants in yoga and for teachers in yoga. And the injuries, in my mind, come from the striving, the pushing, the overstretching, the trying to achieve shapes. When your body is opening and it's softening and there's no gripping or pushing in the body, then the body just goes to its natural capacity, whatever that is, and that will be different for different people.
So just to bring this to a close, I think we've heard a lot actually around what we might view as the physiology of success. Would you like just to sum it up, the kind of the key aspects, some of them that I can remember from what you talked about, this resilient strength, the need to listen in the body, that's not just a mindful external awareness, there's a much deeper level of listening to mind states and seeing movements of mind, the moving away from the striving into a practice that has this embodied self-care, this you learn about how to bring kindness and love into every way that you're moving, and this soft power seems very important. Is there anything else that you feel you want to add just to complete it for us today, the physiology of success?
Well, I think it's a phrase that I think we've become increasingly used to, in the idea that it's all the other way around. Mm-hmm. And so the way when we view it externally, and the judgments and the emphasis we give, is actually the inverse of what we really need. And there's so much emphasis on the external. And with that, we lose sight of what's missing within. And I think that in part is something of a metaphor for life as well. That we can be so tied up with the externals, thinking that success, whatever that represents for us individually, is attributable and distinguished by the externals, and actually success is the relationship we have to ourselves within. And if that is absent or out of balance, then no amount of externals is going to compensate for that.
So thank you very much, Hugh. That's been a really interesting and insightful sharing, and I look forward to the next one.
Okay, thank you very much.